Standing in Metropolitan General Hospital's pristine marble-floored donor reception hall, I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation as Chief Surgeon Dr. Richard Blackwood's voice boomed across the elegant space.
"Empty the trash, nurse!"
He barked, his condescending tone cutting through conversations between wealthy patrons in their evening attire. Every head turned toward me in my simple scrubs, their curious stares making my skin crawl. I approached him slowly, my hands trembling with barely controlled rage, carrying a clipboard that would change everything. "Sign this first," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He scoffed with his trademark arrogance. "I don't sign for nurses." My smile appeared then calm and victorious. "It's your termination letter. I'm the new hospital administrator, and you're done." 6 months before that sweet moment of victory, my life looked completely different. I was Brandy Morrison, 32 years old, and I had dedicated 7 years of my life to being the best ICU nurse Metropolitan General Hospital had ever seen. I genuinely believed that hard work, compassion, and clinical excellence would eventually be recognized and rewarded. How naive I was. Dr. Richard Blackwood had ruled the surgical department like a medieval tyrant for over a decade. Standing 6 feet tall with silver-streaked hair and an expensive suit beneath his surgical coat, he commanded fear rather than respect. His reputation as a brilliant cardiovascular surgeon protected him from consequences, while his ability to charm wealthy donors made him untouchable in the eyes of hospital administration. Every day brought fresh horror stories from the operating rooms. Nurses whispered about his explosive tantrums during procedures, his habit of throwing surgical instruments when frustrated, and his cruel practice of blaming others for his own mistakes. The younger staff members lived in constant terror, while experienced professionals like myself had learned to navigate around his volatile moods. Janet Walsh, our head nurse with 20 years of experience, had become my closest ally in this toxic environment. Her graying auburn hair and kind brown eyes masked a steel backbone that had helped countless staff members survive Blackwood's wrath. "That man is going to kill someone someday," she told me during one of our quiet conversations in the break room. "And when he does, he'll find a way to blame it on whoever's standing closest." Tommy Chen was a brilliant young intern who had graduated top of his class from Johns Hopkins Medical School. His enthusiasm for medicine should have been nurtured and celebrated. Instead, Blackwood seemed determined to crush his spirit entirely. I watched daily as this promising young doctor's confidence eroded under constant criticism and public humiliation. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in late March. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, a 74-year-old grandmother, was scheduled for emergency cardiac bypass surgery. I had worked with her family throughout the night, providing comfort and updates as they waited anxiously in the family lounge. The surgery should have been routine for someone of Blackwood's supposed expertise. I was monitoring Mrs. Patterson's vital signs during the procedure when I noticed her blood pressure dropping dangerously. "Doctor, we're seeing significant hypotension," I announced, clearly following proper protocol. Blackwood was struggling with a particularly difficult arterial graft, his movements less precise than they should have been. Instead of acknowledging the critical information, he exploded. "Don't tell me how to read monitors, nurse!" he screamed, his face reddening behind his surgical mask. "Focus on your job and let me focus on mine." But I could see what he couldn't or wouldn't admit. His sutures were too tight, compromising blood flow. Mrs. Patterson's condition was deteriorating because of his technical error, not despite his expertise. 20 minutes later, Mrs. Patterson went into cardiac arrest on the operating table. The crash team worked frantically to revive her while Blackwood stood frozen, his hands shaking. When we finally stabilized her, he immediately began constructing his narrative of blame. "The nurse failed to properly monitor vital signs. he announced to the surgical team, his voice carrying the authority that everyone had learned not to question. "Her negligence nearly cost us this patient." The lie hit me like a physical blow. I had done everything correctly, and he knew it. Later that day, Sarah Martinez from Human Resources called me into her office. Sarah was a petite woman in her 40s with perfectly styled black hair and a wardrobe that screamed professional ambition. Her office walls displayed her various management certificates and motivational posters about teamwork and excellence. "Brandy, I need to discuss the incident from this morning's surgery." She began, her tone suggesting the conversation was merely a formality. "Dr. Blackwood has filed a report indicating some concerns about your performance during the procedure." I felt my heart racing as I realized the full scope of what was happening. "Sarah, that's not what occurred. Dr. Blackwood made a surgical error that compromised the patient's condition. I followed proper protocol in reporting the vital sign changes." Her expression remained carefully neutral. "I understand your perspective, but Dr. Blackwood is our chief of surgery with an impeccable record. The hospital administration has complete confidence in his professional judgment." That evening, I sat in my small apartment reviewing the events of the day. My cat Shadow sensed my distress and curled up beside me as I tried to process the injustice. Mrs. Patterson would recover, but her family would never know how close they had come to losing her due to surgical incompetence rather than medical complexity. I had always believed that truth would prevail in medical settings where lives hung in the balance. The realization that institutional politics could override patient safety shattered something fundamental inside me. As I lay awake that night, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my entire life. I started keeping detailed notes of every interaction with Dr. Blackwood, every procedure where his behavior put patients at risk, and every instance where the hospital administration chose to protect his reputation over addressing legitimate concerns. I didn't know where this documentation would lead, but I knew I couldn't remain silent while people suffered. The next morning, I returned to work with a new sense of purpose. Janet noticed the change immediately. "You look different today," she observed as we prepared for the morning shift change. "More determined somehow." "I've decided to start paying closer attention to things around here," I replied, choosing my words carefully. Janet's knowing look told me she understood exactly what I meant. That afternoon, while organizing supplies in the ICU storage room, I overheard a conversation that would prove to be the first piece of a much larger puzzle. Dr. Blackwood was speaking quietly with Patricia Holbrook, our hospital administrator near the nurses' station. "The Patterson family is asking questions about yesterday's complications," Patricia was saying. Her voice carried the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations. "I've assured them that everything possible was done, but they're considering requesting their daughter's medical records." "That won't be a problem," Blackwood replied. "I've already amended the surgical notes to reflect the actual sequence of events. Sometimes nurses misremember details when they're under pressure." The casual way he discussed falsifying medical records sent a chill through me. This wasn't just about protecting his ego or avoiding embarrassment. He was systematically covering up medical errors that could establish patterns of incompetence or malpractice. As I quietly continued organizing supplies, I realized I had stumbled onto something far more serious than workplace bullying or professional arrogance. This was potentially criminal behavior that put every patient in the hospital at risk. The discovery that Dr. Blackwood was falsifying medical records transformed my mission from documenting workplace harassment to uncovering what appeared to be systematic medical fraud. I knew I needed help, and I found an unexpected ally in Marcus Rivera, a soft-spoken medical records clerk who had worked at Metropolitan General for over 15 years. Marcus was in his early 40s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a quiet demeanor that made people tend to overlook him. This invisibility had given him unique insights into the hospital's operations and access to information that could prove crucial to building a case against Blackwood.
I've noticed some unusual patterns in surgical record amendments,
Marcus confided during one of our carefully orchestrated encounters in the hospital cafeteria. Normally, doctors might make minor corrections or clarifications, but Dr. Blackwood's changes are extensive and always seem to shift responsibility away from surgical decisions. Together, we began systematically reviewing surgical records from the past 3 years. What we discovered was deeply disturbing. Patient after patient showed the same pattern: initial reports indicating surgical complications or errors, followed by amended reports that blamed equipment failure, nursing oversight, or pre-existing patient conditions. Mrs. Patterson's case was just the most recent example. Marcus showed me 17 other instances where post-surgical complications had been retroactively attributed to factors beyond Blackwood's control. The most heartbreaking was the case of James Mitchell, a 45-year-old construction worker who had died following what should have been routine gallbladder surgery. The original surgical notes indicated difficulty with the laparoscopic procedure and possible damage to surrounding tissue. Marcus explained, his voice barely above a whisper, as we reviewed the files in a quiet corner of the medical library. But look at the amended version filed 2 weeks later. The revised report painted a completely different picture, suggesting that James had suffered an unforeseeable allergic reaction to anesthesia that compromised the surgical outcome. His widow had accepted the hospital's explanation and never pursued legal action, trusting that everything possible had been done to save her husband. I felt physically sick reading these files, knowing that families had been denied the truth about their loved ones' deaths and complications. But our investigation was just beginning to reveal the full scope of the corruption at Metropolitan General. Patricia Holbrook, our hospital administrator, was not merely enabling Blackwood's behavior through willful ignorance. Marcus had discovered a concerning pattern in the hospital's financial records that suggested active collaboration in covering up malpractice incidents.
"Look at these settlement payments,"
Marcus said, showing me a spreadsheet he had carefully compiled. Over the past 4 years, the hospital has paid out over $3 million in quiet settlements to families affected by surgical complications. But here's what's interesting: none of these settlements appear in the hospital's public financial disclosures or insurance claims. The implications were staggering. Not only was the hospital covering up medical malpractice, but they were using funds that should have been allocated for patient care and facility improvements to pay off victims and their families. This explained why our ICU had been operating with outdated equipment and insufficient staffing despite the hospital's apparent financial success. My anonymous letters to the board of directors had been completely ignored, just as I had feared. These weren't isolated incidents of poor communication or administrative oversight. This was a coordinated effort to protect Dr. Blackwood's reputation and the hospital's financial interests at the expense of patient safety and medical ethics. The personal cost of my investigation was mounting daily. Dr. Blackwood had begun targeting me with increasingly vindictive behavior, assigning me to the most difficult patients and demanding schedules that left me exhausted and stressed. During staff meetings, he would single me out for criticism over minor issues, while ignoring similar or worse behavior from other nurses.
"Nurse Morrison seems to be struggling with the demands of ICU nursing,"
he announced during one particularly humiliating staff meeting. Perhaps she would be better suited to a less challenging environment. The suggestion that I was incompetent after 7 years of exemplary service was both professionally damaging and personally devastating. Janet tried to shield me from the worst of his attacks, but her protective efforts only seemed to escalate his targeting.
"He knows you're onto something,"
she warned me after a particularly brutal shift where Blackwood had questioned every decision I made.
"Be careful, Brandy.
Men like him don't go down without a fight. The breakthrough came when Marcus discovered that Patricia Holbrook and Dr. Blackwood had established a complex network of fake medical supply companies to embezzle donation funds meant for hospital equipment upgrades. Wealthy donors believed they were funding state-of-the-art surgical equipment and patient care improvements, but the money was being diverted through fraudulent invoices and kickback schemes. The Jackson Family Foundation donated $500,000 specifically for cardiac surgery equipment upgrades, Marcus explained, showing me the donor correspondence. But look at these purchase orders. The equipment was never bought. Instead, payments went to 3 different supply companies that exist only on paper. This discovery connected all the pieces of the puzzle. Blackwood's ability to charm donors wasn't just about his surgical reputation. He was actively defrauding the very people who trusted him to improve patient care at Metropolitan General. Patricia's protection of him wasn't just about maintaining the hospital's image. She was a co-conspirator in systematic embezzlement. I realized that our evidence, while compelling, needed to be presented to authorities who could take legal action. Hospital administration would never police itself when the corruption reached the highest levels of leadership. I needed legal help from someone with experience in medical malpractice and healthcare fraud. That night, I researched attorneys who specialized in cases against hospitals and medical professionals. The name Diana Rothschild appeared repeatedly in successful malpractice suits and healthcare fraud prosecutions. Her law firm's website showed a woman in her 50s with confident eyes and an impressive track record of holding medical institutions accountable for misconduct. I spent hours crafting an email that would convince her to take my concerns seriously without sounding like a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. The stakes were too high for my approach to be anything less than perfect. Patients' lives hung in the balance, and I might be their only advocate willing to risk everything to expose the truth. As I hit send on that email to Diana Rothschild, I knew there was no turning back. Either I would help bring justice to Metropolitan General Hospital, or I would likely lose everything in the attempt. But the faces of Mrs. Patterson James Mitchell and all the other victims gave me the courage to continue forward into whatever consequences awaited. Diana Rothschild responded to my email within 24 hours, requesting an immediate meeting at her downtown law office. Her response was professional, but carried an undercurrent of urgency that suggested my information had struck a chord with someone who understood the serious nature of healthcare fraud. Her office occupied the 20th floor of a gleaming glass building with panoramic views of the city. Diana herself was more impressive in person than her website photos suggested. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her navy blue suit conveyed both authority and approachability. Most importantly, her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had spent decades fighting powerful institutions on behalf of vulnerable clients. "I've been investigating Metropolitan General Hospital for 2 years, she told me after I had finished presenting my evidence. Your information fills in crucial gaps that we've been unable to access from the outside. The question is whether you're prepared for what comes next." Diana explained that building a bulletproof case against a prestigious hospital and its star surgeon would require evidence that could withstand aggressive legal challenges from highly paid defense attorneys. My documentation was valuable, but we needed concrete proof that would hold up under intense scrutiny in federal court. "Healthcare fraud cases live or die on the quality of evidence," she explained, spreading out files that contained her preliminary investigation materials. "We need recordings, financial documents, and witness testimony that clearly establish intent to defraud patients and donors." The scope of her existing investigation amazed me. Diana had identified patterns of suspicious activity at Metropolitan General that extended far beyond Dr. Blackwood's surgical department. The hospital's emergency room had been systematically overbilling insurance companies for procedures that were never performed. The radiology department had been ordering unnecessary scans to increase revenue. The entire institution appeared to be compromised by fraudulent billing practices. Dr. Blackwood is the key to unraveling all of it, Diana said, showing me an organizational chart that mapped the various fraud schemes throughout the hospital. His relationship with Patricia Holbrook and his access to donor funds make him the central figure. If we can prove his crimes, it opens the door to investigating everyone else. She taught me how to use sophisticated recording equipment that looked like ordinary pens, buttons, and phone accessories. The technology was far more advanced than I had imagined, capable of capturing high-quality audio and video evidence that would be admissible in court proceedings. The key is to get him to discuss the falsified records or the embezzlement schemes in his own words, Diana instructed as she showed me how to operate the hidden cameras. Once we have him admitting to criminal behavior on tape, his defense options become extremely limited. My training in covert evidence gathering felt surreal, like something from a television drama rather than real life. But the gravity of what we were trying to accomplish kept me focused on learning every technique that might help expose the truth about Metropolitan General's corruption. Diana's research had uncovered Dr. Blackwood's employment history at other hospitals, revealing a disturbing pattern of problems that had been quietly resolved through confidential settlements and strategic career moves. Before joining Metropolitan General, he had been terminated from positions at 3 other hospitals for various combinations of malpractice, inappropriate behavior, and financial irregularities. Riverside Medical Center in Ohio paid out $2 million to settle malpractice claims against him. Diana showed me the confidential documents her investigators had obtained. St. Mary's Hospital in Arizona terminated him for sexual harassment of nursing staff. Cedar Hills Medical Center in Nevada let him resign quietly after allegations of billing fraud. The fact that Metropolitan General had hired him despite this history suggested that Patricia Holbrook had either failed to conduct proper background checks or had deliberately overlooked his problematic past. Either scenario raised serious questions about the hospital's commitment to patient safety and ethical medical practice. My secret recording efforts began yielding results within the first week. Dr. Blackwood's arrogance worked in our favor as he seemed incapable of resisting opportunities to boast about his cleverness in manipulating hospital systems and avoiding accountability for his mistakes. During a particularly revealing conversation in his office, I captured him bragging to another surgeon about his ability to manage medical records to avoid malpractice liability. The key is to identify potential problems early and address them before they become legal issues, he said, unaware that every word was being recorded. Sometimes that means helping witnesses remember events more accurately. But our investigation took a dangerous turn when I discovered that Patricia Holbrook suspected someone was gathering evidence against the hospital's administration. Marcus overheard her instructing the IT department to monitor email communications and flag any unusual document access patterns in the medical record system. "She's getting paranoid," Marcus warned me during one of our discreet meetings in the hospital parking garage. Yesterday, she asked me directly if anyone had been requesting historical files or asking questions about financial records. I played dumb, but I think she's getting suspicious. The stakes escalated dramatically when Tommy Chen approached me with his own evidence against Dr. Blackwood. The young intern had been secretly documenting instances of surgical errors, patient abuse, and professional misconduct for months, driven by his own frustration with the toxic environment and concern for patient welfare. "I have photos of surgical complications that weren't reported," Tommy confided, his hands shaking as he showed me images on his phone. "And I recorded him admitting that he sometimes operates while under the influence of alcohol. But I'm terrified of what will happen if he finds out." Tommy's evidence was potentially explosive, but his youth and vulnerable position as an intern made him an easy target for retaliation. Dr. Blackwood had already threatened to destroy his medical career if he ever crossed him, and we knew those weren't empty threats given his connections throughout the medical community. The most shocking discovery came when Diana's financial investigators traced the embezzled donation funds to personal accounts controlled by Dr. Blackwood and Patricia Holbrook. The wealthy donors who believed they were supporting improved patient care had actually been funding luxury vacations, expensive cars, and private school tuition for the conspirators' children. The Wellington Foundation alone donated over $800,000 for pediatric surgery equipment, Diana explained, showing me the bank records that proved where the money actually went. Instead of buying the promised equipment, Blackwood and Holbrook split the funds between personal accounts and used fake invoices to cover their tracks. This discovery was particularly infuriating because I had personally witnessed children suffering from inadequate equipment in our pediatric units. Parents had been told that their children were receiving the best possible care, never knowing that donation money meant to improve treatment had been stolen by the very people responsible for providing that care. My personal life was disintegrating under the pressure of maintaining my double life as a nurse and undercover investigator. My boyfriend of 3 years, Kevin, became increasingly frustrated with my secrecy and the stress that was affecting our relationship.
"You're not the same person anymore, Brandy,"
he said during what would be our final argument.
"You're paranoid, secretive, and obsessed with something you won't even discuss with me. I can't live with someone who shuts me out completely."
Losing Kevin was heartbreaking, but I couldn't risk exposing him to the potential dangers of what I was doing. Dr. Blackwood had already demonstrated his willingness to destroy anyone who threatened him, and I wouldn't put someone I loved in harm's way for the sake of preserving our relationship. The breaking point came when Diana received intelligence that Patricia Holbrook was planning to destroy crucial financial records and medical files that could implicate her and Dr. Blackwood in criminal activity. We had been hoping to gather more evidence before taking legal action, but the timeline had been compressed by their growing awareness that someone was investigating them. "We have enough evidence to pursue federal charges," Diana told me during an emergency meeting at her office. "But if they destroy those records, it will be much harder to prove the full scope of the fraud. We need to act now before they can cover their tracks completely." As Diana prepared to contact the FBI and state medical board with our evidence, I realized that the next phase of our mission would transform everything. Once federal authorities became involved, there would be no hiding my role in the investigation. Dr. Blackwood and Patricia Holbrook would know exactly who had exposed their crimes, and the consequences would be swift and potentially devastating. But the faces of all the patients who had suffered due to their greed and negligence gave me the courage to move forward. Justice for Mrs. Patterson. James Mitchell and countless others demanded that I risk everything to ensure that the truth finally came to light at Metropolitan General Hospital. Diana's plan to involve federal authorities required careful timing and strategic coordination to prevent the destruction of crucial evidence. We had one advantage: Dr. Blackwood and Patricia Holbrook believed they were still operating undetected, which made them careless in their communications and record-keeping. My return from suspension was carefully orchestrated to appear as a defeated acceptance of the hospital's power structure. I adopted a subdued demeanor, avoided eye contact with Dr. Blackwood, and performed my duties with the resignation of someone who had learned their place in the institutional hierarchy.
"Look who decided to behave herself,"
Dr. Blackwood commented loudly during my first day back, ensuring that other staff members witnessed my apparent capitulation.
"I hope you've learned some valuable lessons about respecting your betters during your time away."
I swallowed my rage and simply nodded, knowing that his arrogance was exactly what we needed to capture incriminating evidence. Diana had equipped me with even more sophisticated recording devices, including a camera hidden in my hospital identification badge that could capture both audio and video footage. The challenge was creating situations that would prompt Dr. Blackwood and Patricia Holbrook to discuss their criminal activities openly. Diana suggested that I could accomplish this by subtly raising concerns that would make them feel the need to reassure each other about their security measures. My first opportunity came during a staff meeting where budget constraints were being discussed. I carefully mentioned that some families had been asking questions about promised equipment donations that hadn't materialized in patient care areas. "That's not unusual," Patricia responded smoothly, but I caught the quick glance she exchanged with Dr. Blackwood. "Donor funds sometimes take time to be properly allocated through our procurement processes." After the meeting, I lingered near Patricia's office and captured her urgent phone call to Dr. Blackwood. "We need to review the donor account reconciliation reports," she said, unaware that every word was being recorded. "Some of the nursing staff are asking questions that could become problematic if we're not careful." Marcus had become invaluable in providing access to areas of the hospital where I could plant recording devices. His knowledge of the building's layout and security systems allowed us to position cameras in locations where sensitive conversations were likely to occur. "Patricia has been spending a lot of time in the financial records storage room lately," Marcus informed me during one of our covert meetings. "She's been there after hours 3 times this week, which is unusual for someone at her level." We managed to install a hidden camera in that storage room, positioned to capture anyone who might be tampering with financial documents or medical records. The footage we obtained was shocking Patricia systematically removing and shredding documents while Dr. Blackwood stood watch nearby. "Make sure you get everything related to the Wellington Foundation donation," Dr. Blackwood instructed her, confirming our suspicions that they were actively destroying evidence. "And check for any correspondence with families who might be considering legal action." Diana's financial investigators had traced additional embezzlement schemes that involved overbilling insurance companies for surgical procedures. Dr. Blackwood had been routinely billing for complex procedures that hadn't been performed while Patricia processed the fraudulent claims through the hospital's financial systems. "They've stolen over $4 million from donors and insurance companies over the past 5 years, Diana explained as she showed me the comprehensive financial analysis her team had completed. "This isn't just medical malpractice anymore. This is organized healthcare fraud on a massive scale." The human cost of their crimes became even clearer as we documented cases where patients had received substandard care due to equipment that was never purchased with donated funds. Children in the pediatric wing were using outdated monitoring equipment, while the money donated for upgrades sat in Dr. Blackwood's personal investment accounts. Tommy's courage in coming forward with additional evidence proved crucial to our case. Despite his fear of retaliation, he had continued documenting Dr. Blackwood's misconduct and had captured video footage of the surgeon operating while clearly impaired by alcohol. "He told me that a couple of drinks before surgery helped steady his hands," Tommy confided, showing me recordings that would end any surgeon's career immediately. "But I've seen him struggle with basic procedures that should be routine for someone with his supposed experience." The most damning evidence came when I managed to record a private conversation between Dr. Blackwood and Patricia where they discussed their plans to frame me for the embezzlement if their crimes were ever discovered. "The investigation will focus on the nursing staff first," Patricia said, reviewing what appeared to be fabricated evidence they had prepared. "Brandy Morrison has been acting suspiciously lately, and she had access to donor information through her ICU responsibilities." "Perfect," Dr. Blackwood replied. "Her previous complaints about hospital administration will make it look like she was motivated by revenge. We just need to make sure the financial evidence points in her direction when the authorities start looking." Listening to them calmly plan my destruction was terrifying, but it also provided the clearest possible evidence of their criminal intent. They weren't just stealing money and covering up medical errors. They were prepared to destroy innocent people to protect themselves. Diana's team had been working with federal authorities to prepare for simultaneous raids that would prevent the destruction of evidence while ensuring the safety of everyone involved in the investigation. The FBI had obtained warrants for the hospital's financial records, Dr. Blackwood's personal assets, and Patricia Holbrook's home and business communications. Tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., federal agents will execute search warrants throughout the hospital. Diana informed me during our final planning meeting. You need to be prepared for chaos media attention and immediate retaliation from everyone who gets swept up in the investigation. The personal cost of what I was about to unleash weighed heavily on my mind. Innocent employees would face questioning and scrutiny. The hospital's reputation would be destroyed, potentially affecting its ability to provide patient care. My own career in nursing might never recover from the notoriety of bringing down a prestigious medical institution. But every time I doubted the rightness of our mission, I thought about Mrs. Patterson's near-death experience. James Mitchell's widow accepting false explanations for her husband's death, and all the children who had suffered from inadequate equipment while donation money was stolen for personal gain. Janet sensed that something significant was about to happen, though she didn't know the details of my investigation. Whatever you're planning, I want you to know that some of us have been waiting years for someone with the courage to take action, she told me as we prepared for what would be our last normal shift together. Change never comes from people who are comfortable with injustice. She continued, placing her hand on my shoulder with maternal warmth. Sometimes it takes someone willing to risk everything to protect people who can't protect themselves. As I left the hospital that evening, I took a long look at the building that had been my professional home for 7 years. By tomorrow night, everything would be different. Either I would help bring justice to a corrupt institution, or I would be destroyed by forces more powerful than anything I had ever faced. The dice had been cast, and there was no turning back from the confrontation that would determine whether truth and justice could prevail against institutional corruption and the abuse of medical authority. The FBI raid began at exactly 7 a.m. on a crisp Thursday morning in October. I was already at the hospital, having arrived early to ensure I would be present when federal agents served their search warrants. The coordination was flawless. Teams of agents simultaneously entered the main building administrative offices and Dr. Blackwood's private surgical suite. Chaos erupted throughout Metropolitan General as employees realized they were witnessing a federal investigation of their workplace. Agents in navy blue jackets marked with FBI logos spread throughout the hospital, securing computers, file cabinets, and financial records, while hospital staff watched in stunned silence. Dr. Blackwood was in the middle of a pre-surgical consultation when Agent Sarah Martinez approached him with a warrant for his immediate questioning. His face went white as he read the document, realizing that his carefully constructed world of privilege and protection was collapsing around him.
"This is preposterous,"
he declared loudly, ensuring that everyone in the surgical wing could hear his protests.
"I am the chief of surgery at this hospital, and I will not be treated like a common criminal by federal agents who don't understand the complexities of medical practice."
But Agent Martinez was unimpressed by his bluster.
"Dr. Blackwood, you're not under arrest at this time, but we need you to accompany us for questioning regarding allegations of healthcare fraud, embezzlement, and falsification of medical records."
Patricia Holbrook's reaction was even more dramatic when agents arrived at her office with warrants for her computer systems and financial files. She immediately began making phone calls to attorneys and board members, trying to manage the crisis, while agents systematically seized evidence from her desk and filing cabinets.
"This is a witch hunt designed to destroy the reputation of one of the city's most prestigious hospitals,"
she announced to anyone within hearing range.
"We will fight these baseless accusations with every legal resource at our disposal."
The timing of my presence during the raid was crucial for capturing Dr. Blackwood's unguarded reactions on camera. When he saw me calmly continuing my nursing duties while federal agents disrupted his domain, his fury became uncontrollable.
"This is her doing,"
he screamed, pointing directly at me while Agent Martinez tried to escort him toward the elevator. "That vindictive nurse has been plotting against me because I held her accountable for her incompetence. She's feeding lies to these agents to get revenge for her own professional failures." His public accusation accomplished exactly what Diana and I had hoped. By openly acknowledging that he believed I was responsible for the investigation, he was essentially confirming that there were indeed secrets worth investigating. More importantly, his threats against me in front of federal agents added witness intimidation to his growing list of potential charges. Agent Martinez calmly documented Dr. Blackwood's outburst while other agents continued securing evidence from his office. Among the items seized were personal financial records that showed deposits corresponding exactly to the amounts missing from donor accounts. The hospital's board of directors convened an emergency meeting within hours of the FBI raid, desperately trying to distance themselves from the scandal while preserving the institution's reputation and financial stability. Their panic was evident as they realized that their star surgeon and administrator were potentially facing federal criminal charges. Local media arrived by mid-morning, turning the hospital parking lot into a circus of news vans, reporters, and camera crews. The story of a prestigious hospital under federal investigation for healthcare fraud was too sensational to ignore, especially when it involved a prominent surgeon with connections to wealthy donors. I found myself thrust into an uncomfortable spotlight as reporters sought to identify the whistleblower who had triggered the investigation. Diana had prepared me for media attention, but the reality of cameras and microphones following my every move was overwhelming. "Nurse Morrison, can you comment on the federal investigation of Dr. Blackwood?" shouted reporters as I tried to enter the hospital through a side entrance. "Are you the source who provided evidence to federal authorities?" I followed Diana's advice and declined to comment, but my silence only fueled more speculation about my role in exposing the corruption. Social media was already buzzing with theories about the nurse who brought down a surgeon, making me an unwitting symbol of standing up to medical authority. Tommy Chen finally found the courage to come forward publicly with his evidence against Dr. Blackwood. The young intern's video recordings of surgical misconduct and impaired operating provided some of the most damaging evidence against the disgraced surgeon. "I couldn't stay silent while patients were being put at risk," Tommy told Agent Martinez during his formal interview. Dr. Blackwood created a culture of fear that prevented people from reporting dangerous behavior, but someone had to speak up. The most dramatic moment of the entire confrontation came when Dr. Blackwood attempted to destroy evidence in the medical records storage room. Unaware that we had installed hidden cameras in that area, he thought he could eliminate incriminating documents while agents were focused on other parts of the hospital. Security footage captured him pouring accelerant on filing cabinets containing surgical records and donor correspondence, then igniting the fire with a lighter from his pocket. The hospital's sprinkler system activated immediately, but not before he had destroyed thousands of documents that could have provided additional evidence of his crimes. His arson attempt was witnessed by Marcus, who immediately alerted security and federal agents to the fire in the storage room. When agents arrived, they found Dr. Blackwood standing amid the smoking debris of destroyed records, holding a lighter and reeking of accelerant. "I was trying to prevent confidential patient information from being misused by overzealous investigators," he claimed. But his explanation was laughably transparent. The specific files he had targeted were precisely those that would have provided the strongest evidence of his fraudulent billing and record falsification schemes. Agent Martinez placed him under arrest on the spot, adding arson and destruction of evidence to the growing list of federal charges. The image of the prestigious chief surgeon being handcuffed and led away in front of cameras became the defining symbol of the entire investigation. Patricia Holbrook's arrest followed within hours as agents discovered she had been attempting to transfer embezzled funds to offshore accounts from her office computer. Her sophisticated financial crimes were easier to prove than Dr. Blackwood's medical malpractice, but the evidence was equally damning. The hospital's atmosphere was surreal as federal agents continued their investigation while medical staff tried to maintain patient care. Many employees were questioned about their knowledge of fraudulent activities, while others provided additional evidence of misconduct they had witnessed over the years. Janet approached me during the chaos, her eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude. "Thank you for having the courage to do what the rest of us couldn't," she said, embracing me in the middle of the ICU corridor. "You've given all of us hope that things can actually change." By evening, both Dr. Blackwood and Patricia Holbrook were in federal custody facing multiple charges of healthcare fraud, embezzlement, falsification of records, and destruction of evidence. The investigation had exceeded even Diana's expectations in terms of the evidence gathered and charges that could be pursued. Local news coverage portrayed me as either a heroic whistleblower who had protected patients from dangerous medical practices or a vindictive employee who had destroyed a respected hospital for personal revenge. The polarized reactions reflected the complex emotions surrounding cases where institutional authority is challenged by individuals with limited power. As I finally left the hospital that night, exhausted from one of the most intense days of my life, I realized that the confrontation phase of our mission was complete. Dr. Blackwood and Patricia Holbrook would face justice in federal court, but the larger work of reforming Metropolitan General Hospital was just beginning. The question now was whether the institution could recover from the scandal and rebuild itself around principles of ethical medical practice and genuine patient care, or whether the corruption had been so extensive that the damage was irreparable. The FBI investigation revealed that Dr. Blackwood and Patricia Holbrook had stolen over $4 million through their elaborate embezzlement schemes, while their medical malpractice had directly contributed to at least 12 patient deaths and dozens of unnecessary complications. The scope of their crimes shocked even experienced federal prosecutors who had handled healthcare fraud cases throughout their careers. Dr. Blackwood was indicted on 23 federal charges, including healthcare fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, falsification of medical records, witness intimidation, arson, and destruction of evidence. His medical license was immediately suspended by the state medical board pending the outcome of his criminal trial. The arrogant surgeon who had terrorized hospital staff for over a decade was now facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in federal prison. His attempt to destroy evidence had backfired spectacularly, adding years to his potential sentence while providing prosecutors with clear evidence of his consciousness of guilt. Patricia Holbrook faced 18 federal charges related to embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. Her sophisticated financial crimes had left a clear paper trail that made prosecution straightforward, despite her attempts to shift blame to other hospital employees. The hospital's board of directors found themselves in the unprecedented position of needing to rebuild their institution's leadership while managing the fallout from the criminal investigation. Their first priority was ensuring continuity of patient care while addressing the systemic problems that had allowed such extensive corruption to flourish. To my complete amazement, the board approached me about serving as interim hospital administrator while they searched for permanent leadership. The offer was both flattering and terrifying given my complete lack of traditional administrative experience and the enormous challenges facing the institution. Your investigation demonstrated a level of institutional knowledge and ethical commitment that we desperately need, explained board chairwoman Dr. Helen Crawford during my interview. You understand the problems better than anyone, and you've already proven your ability to take decisive action when patient welfare is at stake. The decision to accept the interim administrator position was one of the most difficult I had ever made. I was a nurse, not a business executive, and managing a major hospital required skills I had never developed. But the opportunity to implement reforms that would prevent future corruption and improve patient care was too important to decline. My first actions as interim administrator focused on transparency and accountability measures that would prevent the kind of secretive decision-making that had enabled Dr. Blackwood and Patricia's crimes. I established an anonymous reporting system for staff concerns, implemented open financial reporting for donor funds, and created patient advocacy positions to ensure that medical decisions prioritized patient welfare over institutional interests. The hospital's financial situation was worse than anyone had realized. Years of embezzlement and fraudulent billing had created massive debt obligations, while legal settlements and federal fines threatened to bankrupt the institution entirely. Insurance companies were threatening to cancel contracts, and several major donors had withdrawn their support, pending the outcome of the criminal trials. But something remarkable began happening as word spread about the reforms I was implementing. Staff members who had been demoralized by years of toxic leadership started demonstrating renewed enthusiasm for their work. Patient satisfaction scores began improving as employees felt empowered to prioritize care quality over political considerations. The community response to my story was overwhelmingly positive, with local media portraying me as a symbol of individual courage triumphing over institutional corruption. My background as a working nurse resonated with people who felt that healthcare had become too focused on profits and prestige rather than patient care. Social media amplified my story nationally, with hashtags like Nurse Justice and Whistleblower Hero trending on various platforms. While the attention was uncomfortable for someone accustomed to working behind the scenes, it also generated support from healthcare reform advocates and potential donors interested in supporting ethical medical institutions. Diana Rothschild's legal team had filed civil lawsuits on behalf of patients and families who had been harmed by Dr. Blackwood's malpractice and the hospital's cover-up efforts. The evidence we had gathered made these cases virtually impossible to defend, resulting in settlements that provided some measure of justice for victims while establishing legal precedents for holding healthcare institutions accountable. Tommy Chen flourished under ethical mentorship, transforming from a terrified intern into a confident resident who embodied the principles of patient-centered medicine. His courage in coming forward with evidence had been crucial to the success of our investigation, and his future as a physician looked bright. Janet was promoted to Director of Nursing, bringing her decades of experience and ethical leadership to a position where she could protect staff members from the kind of abuse that had been routine under previous administration. Her first initiative was implementing comprehensive training on professional conduct and patient advocacy. Marcus Rivera, whose access to medical records had been essential to our investigation, was appointed to head a new transparency initiative that would ensure public accountability for hospital operations. His quiet competence and institutional knowledge made him perfect for creating systems that would prevent future corruption. The criminal trials of Dr. Blackwood and Patricia Holbrook became media spectacles that captured national attention. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of their crimes, while defense attorneys struggled to explain away the extensive documentation of fraudulent activities. Dr. Blackwood received a sentence of 15 years in federal prison, along with orders to pay full restitution to victims and surrender all assets obtained through his criminal activities. His medical license was permanently revoked, ending a career built on arrogance, abuse, and betrayal of medical ethics. Patricia Holbrook was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay complete restitution for the embezzled funds. Her sophisticated financial crimes had impressed even prosecutors with their complexity, but the evidence of her guilt was indisputable. The board of directors, impressed by the hospital's transformation under my leadership and the positive community response to our reforms, offered me the permanent administrator position despite my unconventional background. The opportunity to continue building an institution based on ethical principles and patient-centered care was too important to decline. 6 months after the FBI raid that had changed everything, Metropolitan General Hospital was becoming a model for ethical healthcare administration. Our transparent financial practices had attracted new donors interested in supporting genuine medical excellence, while our commitment to staff welfare had improved both morale and patient care quality. The personal cost of my whistleblowing efforts had been significant. My relationship with Kevin never recovered, and some former colleagues remained resentful about the disruption to their comfortable routines. But the knowledge that patients were receiving better care in an environment free from corruption and abuse made every sacrifice worthwhile. As I prepared for the donor reception that would mark our hospital's renewed commitment to ethical fundraising and transparent operations, I reflected on the journey that had transformed me from a frustrated ICU nurse into a healthcare administrator dedicated to systemic reform. The evening would provide an opportunity to demonstrate how far we had come since the days when Dr. Blackwood's arrogance and abuse had defined our institutional culture. More importantly, it would show potential donors that their contributions would genuinely improve patient care rather than funding personal enrichment schemes. I had no idea that Dr. Blackwood himself would make an appearance at that reception, setting the stage for a final confrontation that would bring my story full circle in the most satisfying way imaginable. The elegant donor reception at Metropolitan General Hospital buzzed with conversations about our remarkable transformation over the past 6 months. Wealthy philanthropists who had withdrawn their support during the scandal were cautiously returning, impressed by our transparent financial practices and improved patient outcomes. I moved through the marble-floored reception hall in my professional navy blue suit, no longer the scrubs-wearing nurse who had been publicly humiliated in this same space. As the hospital's permanent administrator, I carried myself with the confidence that comes from knowing you have earned your position through courage, competence, and unwavering ethical principles. The evening's presentations had gone beautifully. Donor representatives praised our new accountability measures, patient advocacy programs, and the dramatic improvement in staff morale under reformed leadership. Several major foundations announced renewed support for equipment upgrades and research initiatives, validating our commitment to genuine healthcare excellence. Janet approached me near the reception's conclusion, her eyes sparkling with satisfaction. 6 months ago, I never could have imagined this, she said, gesturing toward the positive energy filling the room. You've given all of us something we thought we'd lost forever: pride in our workplace and confidence in our mission. Tommy Chen, now thriving as a second-year resident, joined our conversation with excitement about a research opportunity that would never have been possible under the previous administration's culture of fear and favoritism. Dr. Patterson wants me to lead a study on post-surgical recovery protocols, he announced. Can you imagine Dr. Blackwood ever encouraging residents to conduct independent research? Marcus Rivera had been documenting the evening's events for our new transparency initiative, capturing the genuine enthusiasm and hope that characterized our hospital's renewed culture. His quiet pride in our collective achievement was evident as he showed me photographs that would illustrate our annual accountability report to the community. As the formal presentations concluded and guests began mingling more freely, I noticed a disturbance near the main entrance that drew security guards' attention. Someone was arguing with our reception staff, demanding admission to the donor reception, despite not being on the guest list. My heart stopped when I recognized the voice. Dr. Richard Blackwood had somehow gained access to the hospital grounds and was attempting to attend our donor reception. He was supposed to be awaiting sentencing under house arrest, but he had apparently violated those conditions to confront the institution that had in his mind betrayed him. Security guards were escorting him away when he spotted me across the reception hall. His face contorted with rage as he broke free from their grasp and strode directly toward me, his expensive suit unable to disguise the desperation of a man whose world had completely collapsed.
"There she is!"
he shouted, his voice carrying across the elegant space and silencing conversations throughout the room.
"The vindictive nurse who destroyed everything I built here through lies and manipulation."
Every guest turned to witness this confrontation between the disgraced surgeon and the woman who had exposed his crimes. I felt the familiar sensation of being the center of unwanted attention, but this time my response would be completely different. Instead of humiliation or fear, I felt only calm satisfaction as I approached Dr. Blackwood with measured steps. In my hand was a clipboard containing the security documentation that would formally ban him from hospital premises, but the symbolism of the moment was far more significant than the paperwork itself. "Sign this first," I said quietly, extending the clipboard toward him with steady hands. The irony of our reversed positions was not lost on anyone witnessing the confrontation. 6 months earlier, he had commanded me to empty trash while donors watched. Now I was giving him orders, while those same donors observed his complete downfall. His response was predictably arrogant despite his desperate circumstances.
"I don't sign for nurses,"
he scoffed, but his voice lacked the authority it had once carried. The man who had terrorized hospital staff for over a decade was now just a convicted felon facing federal prison time. My smile appeared naturally as I delivered the words that would conclude our professional relationship forever. "It's your termination letter. I'm the new hospital administrator, and you're done." The silence that followed was profound. Every person in that reception hall understood they were witnessing more than just the confrontation between a whistleblower and the criminal she had exposed. They were seeing the symbolic triumph of ethical healthcare principles over corruption, patient advocacy over institutional protection, and courage over comfortable silence. Dr. Blackwood's face went white as the full reality of his situation hit him. The nurse he had dismissed as insignificant had not only exposed his crimes, but had risen to replace the administrative authority that had once protected him. His empire of fear and fraud had been completely dismantled by someone he had considered beneath his notice. Security guards resumed their escort as Dr. Blackwood struggled to comprehend how thoroughly he had been defeated. His removal from the reception hall marked the final chapter of his connection to Metropolitan General Hospital, while my presence as administrator demonstrated how completely the institution had been transformed. The donor reception continued with renewed energy as guests realized they had witnessed a historic moment in the hospital's evolution. Conversations buzzed with admiration for the dramatic turnaround in institutional culture and the courage it had taken to achieve such comprehensive reform. Dr. Helen Crawford, our board chairwoman, approached me with tears in her eyes. "That was the most satisfying thing I've seen in 30 years of hospital administration," she said. "You've shown all of us what real leadership looks like when it's guided by genuine principles rather than political expedience." The evening concluded with commitments for over $2 million in new donations demonstrating that ethical healthcare institutions could thrive financially while maintaining their commitment to patient welfare and staff dignity. Our transparent practices and accountability measures had attracted exactly the kind of support we needed to continue improving patient care. Later that night, as I reflected on the journey that had brought me from ICU nurse to hospital administrator, I realized that the most important lessons had nothing to do with healthcare administration or fighting institutional corruption. They were about the power that comes from refusing to accept injustice, even when speaking up seems impossible. The courage to challenge Dr. Blackwood's abuse and Patricia Holbrook's corruption hadn't come from any special training or unusual qualifications. It had come from recognizing that patients deserved better than the care they were receiving, and that someone with access to the truth had a responsibility to act on that knowledge. My story demonstrates that ordinary people in seemingly powerless positions can create extraordinary change when they commit to fighting for what's right. The nurses, medical records clerks, and interns who supported our investigation proved that institutional transformation happens through collective courage rather than individual heroism. The key insight from my experience is that corruption thrives in environments where good people remain silent because they believe their voices don't matter. Dr. Blackwood's crimes continued for years because staff members assumed that someone else would eventually take action or that the system was too powerful to challenge. But systems are just collections of individual choices made by people who can decide to prioritize ethics over convenience, patient welfare over institutional loyalty, and truth over comfortable lies. When enough people make ethical choices consistently, even the most entrenched corruption becomes unsustainable. The transformation of Metropolitan General Hospital shows that healthcare institutions can operate ethically while maintaining financial stability and professional excellence. Our commitment to transparency, accountability, and patient-centered care has attracted better staff members, improved patient outcomes, and generated sustainable community support. Most importantly, our story proves that standing up to abuse and corruption creates positive changes that extend far beyond the immediate situation. The reforms we implemented will protect future patients and staff members from the kind of institutional failures that once characterized our hospital. Today, Metropolitan General Hospital serves as a model for ethical healthcare administration, demonstrating that medical institutions can fulfill their healing mission while maintaining the highest standards of professional conduct and financial transparency. Our journey from scandal to success shows that redemption is possible when people commit to doing better. The lesson I hope everyone takes from my experience is that you don't need special qualifications or unusual courage to fight injustice. You just need to care enough about other people's welfare to risk your own comfort and security for the sake of doing what's right. Sometimes the most powerful person in any situation is the one who refuses to stay silent when silence enables harm to continue. That power is available to everyone regardless of their position in institutional hierarchies or their access to traditional sources of authority. Have you ever witnessed injustice in your workplace or community, but stayed silent because you thought your voice wouldn't matter? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how we can all find the courage to speak up when it counts. Please like this video if my story inspired you to think differently about standing up for what's right. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about ordinary people creating extraordinary change through ethical courage. And please share this video with anyone who might need encouragement to fight injustice in their own life. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that your voice has more power than you realize to create positive change in the world. Stay strong, stay ethical, and never underestimate your ability to make a difference when you choose courage over comfort.